You are listening to the Exceptional Conservative Network. For more information, go to www.theexceptionalconservativeshow.com.
I don't read a script. Script reads me.
Headley.
And I'm Ryan Wolf.
Our greatest responsibility is to serve our
Treasure Valley communities,
the El Paso, Las Cruces communities, Eastern Iowa communities,
Mid-Michigan communities.
we are extremely proud of the quality, balanced journalism that CBS 4 News produces.
But we are concerned about the trouble irresponsible, one-sided news stories
plaguing our country.
The sharing of biased and false news has become all too common on social media. More alarming, some media outlets publish these same fake stories without checking facts first.
The sharing of biased and
False news has become all too common on social media.
More alarming, some media outlets publish these same fake stories without checking facts first.
Unfortunately, some members of the media use their platforms to push their own personal bias and agenda to control exactly what people think. And this is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
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 Yo, we trade actors, motherfucker.
Hey, good day to you all. Welcome to the new. I'm your host, Randy Perham. And happy Friday. And it is a fantastic Friday at that. This is the day we take, this is the day that we take the time to thank our men and women who serve our nation around the world. We salute you and thank you for the sacrifices, commitments that you are making in defense of our freedom, liberties, and our way of life. And I will bet dollars and donuts that you are probably enjoying more freedom than we are here at home right now. So if it fits your conditions, stay where you are. But seriously, I hope you all have a safe journey back home wherever you may be around the world, and that things are in accordance to your plans and wills as you embark back with your families and loved ones. So thank you for that. And I'm keeping a steady eye on the microphone. I figured out what the issue was from last week. The cord kind of got bent, and so it kind of like just makes its way out of the microphone itself. So got it. But I'm also paying attention to the meter. So thank you for those who made comments last week cussing me out and everything else, saying, you know, I'm a piece of crap because my audio didn't work. I duly noted. And but I appreciate the information that you shared with me about that, and letting me know, because like I said, I wasn't paying attention to it. But anyways, so today we're going to discuss, we're going to do a deep dive on the Second Amendment today, and I figured this was be a good discussion, only because the Second Amendment is under attack, as usual. But once again, you know, we're now embarking on, you know, the far liberal left, who are calling for the repeal of the Second Amendment. which is nonsensical in itself. But okay, we'll entertain this conversation today only. We're going to discuss that in detail, and I have my great friend who's over in California, California NIA. She's gonna weigh in also on her thoughts about the Second Amendment today, and as to how it affects also Californians. So we're gonna discuss that, but without further ado, we're going to do this here. We have to remind ourselves constitutionally exactly what is the Second Amendment.
2. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed.
I think that's plain and simple and common sense enough to understand. So the question is, why do we have laws surrounding the Second Amendment? If the Constitution is the supreme law of the land, ladies and gentlemen, and it says boldly, plain English, shall not be infringed. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. If shall not be infringed means you cannot encroach on those rights, you cannot take away those rights, then how is it possible? I want somebody to explain this to me. How is it possible that we have laws surrounding the Second Amendment? We don't have laws surrounding butter knives. People get stabbed with butter knives. So help me out here. Tiffany.
Good morning.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Awesome.
How are you this morning?
I am living a legend.
Well, that's right. It's afternoon where you are, right?
Yeah, it is afternoon where I'm at. I know it's still relatively morning where you are.
I'm having my coffee because I still have to.
Me too. I'm still having my coffee too. Leftist tears. That's my coffee. Making liberals cry every day.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness.
Tiffany, thank you for joining us. For those, ladies and gentlemen, for those that don't know, Tiffany is the host of Beyond the Lines with Tiffani Jones on Tuesdays and Thursdays on TECN TV.com. And she was gracious enough to get out the bed early enough to join me in my shenanigans today, because we was having a conversation last week because she was talking about she had the. I'll let you tell the story. You want to go to the range, but you're in California.
That's possible. We have ranges over here. I said that because I think it's important just to know how to do that in case I own a firearm, right? Here in California, we are battling a lot with the police, the possibility of defunding the police, are people in the overall department not doing their job and may be recalled. Gascon, for example, well, that would be the recall that I'm talking about. So if you have that, and you don't have the protection, what choice do people have?
Mm-hmm.
Do they have a, you know what I mean? Are you just going to just be passive about it and not protect yourself? Because realizing that you're not going to have the protection that you need on the streets, so to speak, with the police. So what do you do in those circumstances? And I think it's important. I think it's important to have it. At least you're going to be carrying identification and a registration card or something to say that you can use it. I mean, we have registration cards and cards to say that you can smoke marijuana. Why not have a registration card to say you can have a firearm? So, It's it's a complicated issue over here only because everyone's a little bit more passive about it. They're coming from the angle like they don't want these firearms in the homes because if you have small children, what if they get a hold of it and accidentally shoot someone? So it's a big topic. Nobody wants arms in California, but the reality is what's going to happen should we go through defunding the police, and that is a reality and not a possibility.
Right. And you brought up a good point. You said people don't want to have guns because it may fall into the hands of children. Well, that's where adult responsibility comes into play. That's why we have gun safety courses. We have you could buy a trigger lock. You could buy a gun safe to ensure that little
Hmm.
rugrat doesn't get a hold of your semi-automatic Uzi. So, yeah, so that logic in itself, it doesn't pass the common sense test of infringing on someone else's rights and abilities to protect themselves. And like you said further, we're looking at the whole defunding the police mantra that's going on right now. A matter of fact, I was in a Zoom call the other night. It was a multiple candidates that's running for office, and it was supposed to be like a bipartisan type class uh,
Hmm.
where we were discussing immigration and everything. And one of the
Mm.
other participants, we had our chat rooms going where we was promoting ourselves, giving our websites and all that stuff, and donate to me and everything. So we was doing that in there in the chat room, and it was like at first I was like, "What is everybody doing?" And I was like, "Why are they doing that? We're supposed to be paying attention to these two gentlemen, taking their time to talk about immigration." But nonetheless, just one person out of San Diego, her campaign is geared around defunding the police and open borders. Like she was like, she didn't show her picture, so I don't know what she looks like. But she was out of San Diego. She was a candidate for California 10. I'm not sure if that's San Diego, but I think it was California 10 or something like that. But I know for sure she was San Diego because that was her candidate for San Diego or something like that. Assemblywoman or no, U.S. Congress for San Diego. But I'm just like, why would you run on the mantra of defunding the police? So you're willing to forego that police protection, that armed protection, in hopes that you can just
Right.
talk down people. So
But
explain to
that,
me that logic if you know, because I'm sure you're in those circles and people talk about it. So explain to me that logic if you can.
I think that kind of developed from Black Lives Matter. And the premise around Black Lives Matter was to ensure that there were rights for people who may have broken the law and their rights to be, treated better by the police, right?
Mm-hmm.
So defunding the police would be going in line with, hey, I support this theory of, people who are have interaction with the police um, are victims. Not understanding the full scope or the full story. We don't know what happened. Half the time when we get the news, we don't know the full story. We don't know what he did previously. We don't know. But it's the assumption just because they are of a certain culture that they're being victimized.
Right.
Um, and I believe that part of that is due to the Black Lives Matter movement, where and there's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing wrong with protesting the treatment of an individual who
Mm-hmm.
has been pulled over by the police. Um, it it's just I think it's gotten to a point where we either need to come up with other solutions other than let's defund the department that protects and serves us, right? I know in my experience when I've dialed 911, and I have a couple of times, they've come to my rescue, and it's great.
Right.
You call, they come, they handle whatever it is that they have to handle, and they're nice about it and they leave, right? Um, but I really believe it's the, that the black and brown culture being victimized over police brutality, and I think that's the underlining reason why they want to defund the police.
And that makes sense. Given given the history, given the history of the proverbial American police system, it is rooted in slavery. The police were constructed as slave patrollers. To round up runaway slaves and everything else. So, and that segues. I hate to make the connotation that the modern day police are slave patrollers, but nonetheless, the roots of policing in America is founded in that to a large degree, and so it also segues from it's also a derivative of the
Hmm.
Second Amendment. So
Yes.
we have given allegedly, allegedly, allegedly. So we have given so the framers have given constitutional authority to a segment of the population at first,
Hmm.
the well-regulated militia. And then there was an argument about the militia and how they would go. Would they be able to go down to the South? Would they be armed and dispatched down to the South to put down slave rebellions? And
Hmm.
the Southern folks, of the time were like, yeah, we can't bank on that. So you need to change that wording around to make it, where we can have, a well-regulated militia in order to secure a free state, not just a certain group of people. And so James
Hmm.
Madison said, all right, fair enough. Well-regulated militia in order for the security of a free state, comma, and the right of the people to keep and bear arms. And so the militias were like, okay. So everybody can be armed. They can help us out. We can help them out and everything else. But what about black people? Should they be armed? Should they be able to be armed? That was the lingering question. And go ahead.
I mean, you can take this way back to the mistreatment of blacks, um, and it's always defined by race, through race, and critical race theory is something that is very popular now that they're trying to decide how to deal with that,
Mm-hmm.
and it's important to talk about it. It's important to find solutions. Um, it's just that we, as a culture, haven't had necessarily, quote unquote, the privileges, if you will, that other cultures have had. And I think, especially here, I mean, uh, people here are so done with someone coming in like a conservative Republican coming in to, as they proclaim, to dictate what is to be done, than to have the people um, voice their rights. But the people are really not voicing their rights. They're still being dictated to how to how to carry out their lives. And that was really something when I ran for office. I'm My stance is to educate people to make the best choices for themselves. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Um, Never to have someone dictate. Why am I going to dictate to you how to live your life when I'm not in your home on a daily basis? I
Right.
don't know what you go through,
Mm-hmm.
but I've had experiences, and those experiences have taught me to uh, guide people, but never to dictate what they need to do for their lives. But again, and coming from California, we're very strict on, the people's rights and what they deserve because for so long the black and brown culture has been victimized.
Mm-hmm. So
And
And you're right.
I get it. I get it.
Yes, and you're right. California, and when we're talking California, we're talking about the administration of California and how they are ubiquitously imposing, uh, imposing, laws to restrict the freedoms granted, therefore, therein within the Constitution, right? They're saying you cannot. They make it so difficult. Not that you can't own a gun, but they make it so difficult where people are turned off from owning guns, and then they send out these talking points and everything else to embed into people's minds that you're right. Yeah, I don't need a gun. We don't need guns. No, this is horrible, and then it starts creating this cataclysmic effect of okay, we can disarm the population, and now we can impose more control over them, and have their mindset a certain way. And you see this uniquely done in California and New York. It's starting to trickle in a little bit into Oregon, but it's in Washington State. It's definitely in Washington State, but it's trickling in on the border states. And so it's interesting to see that dichotomy that goes on versus Middle America, where it is like, I wish you would. So there's a different mindset, and we have to kind of like peel back the onion as to why. But I think that will be a later show, some other time. But first, I want to get your thoughts on this segment here.
The Second Amendment has always been one of the most hotly debated subjects in American politics. And it's not hard to see why. When a conservative looks at the amendment, they tend to focus in on this. Whereas when a liberal looks at the amendment, all they tend to see is this. And issues surrounding gun rights have seemed to grow uglier and uglier in recent history. After a mass shooting, the leader of the NRA said this:
"The only thing that stops a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun."
While white gun rights activists conducted open carry protests, and Cliven Bundy and his supporters threatened to shoot federal agents if they attempted to stop him from allowing his cattle to illegally graze on government land, a number of young black people have been killed by police for merely holding guns or objects that resemble them. In perhaps the most outrageous incident of all, a child named Tamir Rice was killed by police without any warning or hesitation for the crime of holding a toy gun in a park in an open carry state. Those officers, by the way, went completely unpunished. And yet, as ugly as this vast racial inequity is, as ugly as Second Amendment debates get, as ugly as calls for Second Amendment solutions by right-wing radicals are,
I'm hoping that we're not getting to Second Amendment remedies. I hope the vote will be the cure for the Harry Reid problems.
The historical origins of the Second Amendment might be uglier still. And if you're wondering, could it really be that bad? Prepare to be a little horrified. Before I address the circumstances surrounding the adoption of the amendment, I should first talk very briefly about perhaps the biggest question surrounding the Second Amendment, which is whether the right to bear arms is an individual right or a collective right. This debate seems to me built right into the wording of the amendment. The fact that it says the right of the people makes it seem like a right that applies to individuals, while the clause, being necessary for the security of a free state, makes it seem like a collective right belonging to states. Supreme Court precedent has held the right to be an individual right since the 2008 decision in the case of the District of Columbia versus Heller. That decision overturned 70 years of precedent established by the United States versus Miller in 1939, which held that the framers included the Second Amendment to ensure the effectiveness of the military. But in reality, while the origins of the Second Amendment have little to do with the rights of individual people to have guns for private use, they also have very little to do with the military, if by that we mean the federal armed forces. In fact, the US did not even officially establish a large standing army until the outbreak of World War II. When the Constitution was written, national security was ensured by the federal government's right to raise, discipline, and arm a temporary militia. But even these federal militias were not what the Second Amendment refers to. The militias that are necessary to the security of a free state are of course state militias, and the right of states to raise, discipline, and arm their own militias was granted in the amendment in response to Article 1, Section 8 of the proposed Constitution, which only granted the federal Congress that right. But if Congress has the exclusive right to raise a militia, what would happen in the event of a slave revolt in the South? Could Southern slave owners count on the North-controlled federal government to help them protect their right to own slaves? Well, that's exactly what slaveholders and slave advocates were concerned about when the Second Amendment was drafted. As Patrick Henry put it, if the country be invaded, a state may go to war, but cannot suppress slave insurrections. If there should happen an insurrection of slaves, the country cannot be said to be invaded. They cannot therefore suppress it without the interposition of Congress. George Mason was similarly worried that the Congress would refuse to allow states to raise militias to protect the institution of slavery. Congress may neglect to provide for arming and disciplining the militia, and the state governments cannot do it, for Congress has an exclusive right to arm them. Patrick Henry also feared that Congress would use its exclusive right to raise militias to abolish slavery directly, in a process called manumission. In fact, his fears were quite justified, as Abraham Lincoln did just that. They will search that paper and see if they have power of manumission, Henry said. Have they not, sir? Have they not power to provide for the general defense and welfare? May they not think that these call for the abolition of slavery? May they not pronounce all slaves free, and will they not be warranted by that power? They have the power in clear, unequivocal terms, and will clearly and certainly exercise it. For his first draft of what became the Second Amendment, James Madison, a slaveholder himself, wrote that a militia is the best security of a free country. But after Henry, Mason, and others insisted that the amendment make it clear that Southern states be able to preserve their slave patrol militias independent of the federal government, Madison changed the word country to state. So given that the Second Amendment was born out of a concern to protect the institution of slavery, do you think maybe it's time we stop using it to frame our ethical debates about gun laws? If we move our focus away from what the Constitution does or doesn't say, what the founders had in mind or not, and started to look instead at the real-world consequences of gun laws, could it really be that bad?
I yield the floor to you, ma'am.
Again, I understand what they're saying in your constitutional right to bear arms. And in the case where, for defense, but as you read that, and as you listen to that, and the emphasis being on to protect your slaves, probably doesn't sit well with most people. I'm just saying, most people that, come from a family of slaves per se, right? So understanding that, there are going to be other politicians or other people to lean towards that theory. It's not even a theory. It's just, it's a part of history. It did occur. And okay, so, but does that have anything to do with where we are today? And today, with all the stuff that's going on in presently and currently, I believe that we have to take a second look at that and really understand the language. And that's what media does. They look at the issue and they persuade you, or you align with the belief of that person who is presenting the information, whatever perspective that is. And I think that we need to change how we are looking at these things, or have people to explain and educate people on what they really mean. Because you can take any part of a sentence, you can take any part of a conversation in a bite, and you can put that bite into something and make it negative that was meant to be positive. So I think we just really need to have more education on the Constitution, and our rights. Not like it's not a race issue. It's not black or white. It's just an individual having the right to protect themselves, period. But over the years and every time we always struggle with
I couldn't agree with you more.
no, right? I mean, I know. Look, let me just say this. My grandmother was in the South and she owned a gun. And I remember one year we visited and the neighbor got crazy. So she pulled out her rifle and was like, you can't overstep your boundaries. And if you do, you know, here are the consequences.
Mm-hmm.
And I get that. I get it. But it's like I said, with the way that the country is right now and the emphasis on race, they're always going to go back to race. They're not going to look at it as a clear cut issue. Like as an individual, as a person, it's
But
never
they
going to
should.
be that way until we start to educate people on the Constitution and both sides of it. Just like the
And,
guy said, he brought up some very good points because one side's going to look at it one way, the other side's going to look at it another way.
so one thing that I had not a disagreement, but one thing I noticed about that video was the emphasis and the conflation of when black people get guns or they're targeted. But he didn't mention, because depending on when the making of that video was, didn't mention the fact that white people. Matter of fact, there was two recently. Um, a 16-year-old white kid in Maryland, and I want to say he was 34 or 41 in Oregon, in Portland. Both white, killed by police for yielding a gun. The kid in Maryland was in his own driveway. People called the police and said, "Hey, this kid is, flashing his gun around in the parking lot." And it was a toy gun. Police pulled up, questions not asked. And when they went to go, approach him, he was on the ground and everything. And they moved the gun away. They assumed that he was dead at the moment. And so when they went to go to his body, he turned over and pulled out a knife and tried to stab one of the cops. And so the cop, finished him off. No news about that. In Portland, Oregon, guy in the park yielding a gun. His was a real gun. And the police was trying to talk him down and everything else. And of course, there might have been some mental health issues involved with that. But nonetheless, the police were not delineating, okay, he just have mental issues. All they see is this dude got a gun and he's pointing at me. I'm finna blast him.
Right. Right.
But that's not
No,
talked about in the media. All they want to focus on is, it goes back to your point about the media swaying, public opinion about something that is so common to everyday people, but they may not know about it because the media ignores it because it doesn't fit that narrative. And so
right.
I have a problem with that because even back in the '60s, the Black Panthers took over your very own home state. They took over the state capitol armed, exercising their rights. Now, of course, that's where the banning of firearms on federal property became became law because of that. But nonetheless, they still exercised their rights. No one went to jail. No, it was okay. Y'all made y'all point. We had today. So, and I say all that to say this: you're right. Education is key when we're talking about the Constitution and exercising our constitutional rights. But then you have that conversation, and we have this conversation about whether or not the applicability of the Constitution is equally applied to people of color versus whites. That is a ongoing everyday conversation, and I would challenge people to actually look at, not through anecdotal evidence, but look at actual everyday people and how they exercise their rights. Whether that's free speech, whether that's carrying a gun. And this is real, by the way. It's not
You're in
right.
Texas. That makes all the sense in the world. I mean, if I were to, show one, it'd be like, oh my God, why does she have that? I have to show a vaccine card just to have dinner. I have to show, you
Exactly.
have to show, you have to show proof of uh, that, you went to the doctor and you are allowed to now use marijuana for medicinal purposes for healing, right?
Hmm.
And I don't see it. I don't see own personally. I don't see owning a firearm much different, as long as you pass the requirements and you get the certification and you carry the card to do it. Then that's ensuring that you're a responsible citizen and that you can carry it, right? Um,
I don't have a
but
problem with
you
that
also have,
necessarily. Depending on where, I would say that should be a locality thing, Because, for example, um, backwood Tennessee, where my grandparents came up, and I, went back for a family reunion a couple years ago. I didn't bat an eye when I saw, there was like a couple of teenagers, like younger teenagers, like pre-teenies, shotgun loaded across the shoulder, walking down the street. I didn't bat an eye because that's commonplace things for people in the South, and it's actually commonplace in places like Alaska. If you're not carrying in Alaska, you might get looked at sideways, like, oh, you're a liberal, because carrying in Alaska is kind of like the way of life. That is your protection because of wildlife, or you might run across some food, that's readily available right there in the spot, i.e., a moose or a bear, what have you, wildlife. That's right. You like, oh man.
don't
So
you know we're supposed to care about all animals and all people? That's what this is really about. You can't shoot them. No, just kidding. You can't.
you can starve if you like. You
No,
can eat the
yeah,
leaves
I'm
that's
coming for
falling off the trees and put it in a pot. But but you're right. There for you say that there are people that are like that. You look at PETA. And it's like, okay, you say that noise in the public space, but let's go to your refrigerator right now. At the end of the day, so
Mhm.
it is what it is. But I want to jump to, because we're almost out of time, and I want to jump to the pinnacle piece of today's discussion as to how this person interprets the Constitution of the Second Amendment. I thought that was pretty interesting because I was like, hmm, that's a way
It's
to
a very
twist history.
interesting topic.
Was that?
It's a very interesting topic, and I'll tell you why. Crime goes up, it increases, and it has increased here. So, what do you, if you defund the police that are supposed to be in the communities to protect the communities, you know, in the community, and crime is increasing, and it is. I think by 37% over here, people are walking over dead people that have been shot and killed by a gun. Um, you know, what rights do other people have? Like I said, as long as you can carry some kind of identification or certification saying that you are of right mind to carry it and use the firearm. I don't see what's wrong with that.
Well, okay. Let me push back on that for a second. Let me challenge that logic. That's it. I agreed earlier when I said I can see that for locality issues, but let's revisit that a little bit more in depth. If a person knowing that in order for me to secure a firearm for nefarious reasons, not for self protection, not to protect others, not to protect property, not to become, an imaginary police officer or anything, but for the sole intent and purposes of committing a crime or to inflict harm onto others, would they actually go through the steps to get an identification card or even a license to do so? No,
Sure.
they
And
don't.
I don't think I see, I tend to disagree with that because I come from, like we're huge marijuana people over here, right? So you have to have a card. right? If you want that, and then no matter for what the reason, marijuana can be used for different reasons. It can be a byproduct of something else, but as long as you have that card, or you're fine. You can smoke outside of an establishment, outside of a restaurant. I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah, that's what
And I'm,
marijuana. But just because you have a license to carry a gun doesn't give you the license to just use it willy nilly and just shoot whoever you want. That's what I'm saying. So
true, I understand what you're saying, but a lot of people use marijuana for the same reason. They don't, it's not like, hey, and you don't even, I mean, who's to say if it's cut with something else? Did they drink with it? Did they, who's to say that? Who's to say that? We don't know that, right?
right.
But it's for medicinal purposes, to calm you down, or to do whatever the case may be. And that's all I'm saying. I'm
Yeah,
saying
no,
because,
I agree. I agree with you on that. There are people that may ascertain, the proper licensing and everything else to do that. But when we're talking like the large majority, like myself, yourself, we're not going to go get a license for a gun and say, okay, now that I got this gun, I'm going to go rob the bank because I'm going to get away with it because, they let me buy the gun. Cool. Hey, I'm going to do this.
well,
That's not
okay,
the,
so how do you,
that's not the mind frame
okay,
of
so,
most
well,
people.
how do you explain what happened in Mandalay Bay in Las Vegas when he shot up a bunch of people? Like,
He snapped.
literally, people, I mean, we could sit here and talk about it, but those people, some of the same people that you're talking about, who do have, you know, certified, uh,
Yeah, they have the
you
certifications
know
and
what I'm
stuff.
saying,
Yeah, but
certification.
those
There
are
we go.
there's
But
very that's but
I'm sure that,
those incidents are very very far few in between. Very far few.
and
That's
I
why I say,
get that,
it goes
and
back
I
to mental health.
understand that.
It goes back to, bro, man, just
It
they
goes
had a
back to a lot
moment
of things.
that day, and say, you know what, Las Vegas
No,
is
and I'm
pissing me
sure
off.
he had.
What's that?
Right. And I'm sure he had a license to
Oh,
do it in the right frame of mind when he got the license to get the gun, right? Because I'm sure he couldn't get it without it. So you have these very specific incidents that people go in, they shoot a bunch of people mentally or not at that time. But before they get the license to carry the firearms, and then they had a bad day, somebody made them mad, and now they shot up a bunch of people.
should
How do you explain that?
easy.
As
It is.
someone who's
Here's the easy answer. It is what it is. Do we apply that? Do we apply? No, serious when I say this. Do we
I
apply
know
that
you are.
logic? That logic that you just explained. Do we apply that to people that's getting driver licenses? No, we don't. Because people get ran over every day. We don't apply that when somebody goes into Walmart to buy a set of butcher knives and they, decide to hack up people. We don't say, oh, we need to have, a knife license. We don't do that. We don't talk about these things with, arsonists, to go buy gasoline. We don't say, hey, you need to have a license to buy gasoline because you might set some people on fire or some things on fire. We don't do that. The concentration on the firearms is only for one reason, and one reason only, because it produces a mass cognitive effect when somebody is shot. And it's like, oh my God, it's shock value. So people are afraid. But if you apply that same logic of a person being shot to a person being stabbed, being set on fire, being ran over by a car, we would not have any liberties in life. We would not be able to do anything because we would be so scrutinized as a human being because you might do something. You might take this book and smash somebody's head in with it so you can't read. And I've seen, literally seen countries that operate that way. They have that mentality. Look at Europe. But people still find ways to kill people. If I want you dead, I don't necessarily have to use a gun. A gun may
I
be
agree
easier.
with what you're saying. I agree with what you're saying. But in order to have a society like that could carry firearms without any type of certification or understanding that the person knows how to operate it. You know, you're talking about a very sophisticated society, which this is not. America's not as sophisticated as other countries. You know what
That's
I'm
not
saying?
true.
You're,
That's not true.
I think I well,
Let's think
I
about
bet
it.
you when I say
We
that,
got kids.
when
We
I
got
say
kids
that,
on
I just say
farms
that
driving
like,
tractors, harvesting corn and stuff.
no,
Literally, kids
I
like 5 years
understand
old.
that. I'm
They get
just
on the
saying. So
tractor.
if that's the case, then why can we not do that if it is part of our constitutional right? So the only way you could do that is to educate people on the constitutional right so that they can carry it. But then again, this is what I'm saying. You have to, in this society, create. I think the paperwork or certification is a boundary, but it also lets the other person know, should something happen, I'm taking full responsibility for that. I mean, we are an advanced society to some degree, but when you're talking about firearms and not having certification to carry them, that's a whole nother thing. You have to understand accountability and responsibility.
So,
those are those those are things that you must understand. And
so
how else do you approach it? You're like, oh yeah, people should
yeah, it's
carry
called
firearms. I
the
get
way
it.
we approach it is very simple. Darwinism. The strongest survive at the end of the day, because they're like I said, you know, you have places where everyone carries a gun. Texas, for example, Texas. Yes, we have, you know, some yahoos that, you know, they will pop off and, you know, shoot you because, you know, just because you looked at them sideways. That's Texas. Alaska, you know, some places are like that. New York, some places like that. Illinois, Florida, you name it, there are places like that. However, when you have a population of people who are pretty much all either armed or can be armed at a moment's notice, you will see a drastic decrease in such type of activities. Just a couple months ago, Texas passed a law saying, you know, hey, you don't need a license to carry a gun. It's constitutional carry, because guess what? You don't have to apply or get an application or get a certification to exercise your first, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, or ninth, or even the 10th Amendment. Right? Because they're called the Bill
Yay,
of Rights.
Texas.
These are your rights, God-given, country-given rights. So if you're saying that a person should be certified in exercising one out of the 10 amendments, then what's going to stop another person from coming along and saying, you need to be certified to give a speech, to exercise your
Right.
First
I
Amendment right?
get what you're saying, but if you're basing it on locale, thank God that you guys have someone who understands the Constitution and understands your right to bear arms. When you're talking about different locales or you're talking about different states, they're going to be governed differently. Like we literally, like I told you, we're starting on November 4th. You have to show identification that you got the vaccine to
Now, if
walk
that
in
state
to a restaurant.
Now, if California was a constitutional carry state, how much are you willing to bet that the people that law would be in effect because they are a constitutional carry state?
But we're not governed that way. Do you
Exactly.
understand what I'm saying? We're
Exactly, and that's the
not
problem.
governed that
That's the
way.
problem. And that's what I'm getting to. That is exactly what I'm getting to. Because California isn't governed that way to allow a constitutional carry, they're imposing these other infractional laws onto your rights. Like in order for you to eat here, you have to have a card. You know, and it's like, but here in Texas, you can try that if you want to. Look, I'm going to eat here one way or the other. You can. Welcome to
See, I
Burger
mean,
King.
we would
Have it
have
your
a big
way.
problem. We'd have a big problem over here, of course,
But that's why.
but uh, no, I know. But see, again, it's the governance of the state. You guys have different laws because the people who are in position are advocating for your liberty and your freedom.
Right. Yes.
That
Absolutely.
is not so here
I know.
because we're pretty sovereign over here. We don't have to be a part of any of the states. We could live solo over here by ourselves as an island by ourselves. And that's
And a lot of us in the rest of America, we agree with that. We're hoping California becomes its own place off in the ocean. A lot of people are hoping that, but but that is the thing, and I'm glad you pointed that out. You know, should are we at that juncture in society where we're revisiting the idea of a perfect union? Should we
right.
say, you know what? Okay, we did this, this experiment called the United States of America for 200 some odd years, and it's just not working anymore. So all the states break up and do what you want to do. Would that work? I mean, we see Europe kind of has that construct already.
Well, you saw that in COVID. You saw after it came down to the president of the United States at that time, former President Trump, gave the authority to the governor of each state to figure out what was best,
as prescribed by the
which
10th
was
Amendment. Yes.
right. Of course, somebody perhaps understanding that, so um, again, it's based on the people who understand the Constitution and are governing for the people by the people according to the rights of the Constitution. When you have people that don't understand that, then you know you can do whatever you want. You can control a group of people if they don't understand their rights, if they don't understand their power. Yeah, it took us an hour almost to get there, right?
Man, oh.
I mean, I understand what you're saying. I get it. I mean, I understand both sides. I am bipartisan in the fact that I believe that we should be governed by both sides for the people that, we have the right and the left, but and then we make, we can come together for the people. It's just that we're in a place and time right now where that's just not happening. And it's definitely not happening here. There is no bipartisanship here. It's, and I will say this because it's not that I'm making this up. It's my experience, and it's his experience of the Republican Party here. If you dare come and say something that's constitutional, it's on. You're in a debate. But most Republicans really do know how to debate. Like, they know their rights, they know the Constitution. If someone gets into it with the Republican, you better know your stuff because the Republican's going to definitely bring it based on what they know about the Constitution. The other side might go on emotion, but the debate is definitely going to be set factual.
And I agree with you.
Um,
I agree.
and they, yeah.
Educating people on their rights. Okay, we can. I tell people because I have constitutional discussions a lot with people, and I say let's just remove for a minute Article 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and so on forth, so forth. Let's remove those for a second, and let's just focus on the Bill of Rights, the 10 amendments. Let's just focus on the first 10, not all 28. Just focus on the first 10, and 27, excuse me. And I know there was a 28 in the works, but anyways, we look at that. We look at the Bill of Rights that will not change, cannot be changed. That's why they're called the Bill of Rights. This is your constitution. This is your right ordained by God and country. And so
Right.
when you try to legislate that, you're going to create problems. Because you're telling a person that I am taking away your God-given and country-given rights because I'm feeling some kind of way about this. We're looking at this right now. We're seeing this right now with the First Amendment, and now there's the other side of the argument where the Second Amendment is the First Amendment exists because of the Second Amendment. So you try to infringe on my right to speak, my right to worship who I want to worship, my right to address grievances with my government, then I am going to resort to my Second Amendment right, which a lot of people fail to understand and draw the correlation to exactly what Thomas Jefferson said in the Declaration of Independence in the 3rd paragraph. In the event, anytime the government gets beside itself and wants to act stupid, in so many words, it is the right of the people to dissolve that government and institute a new one.
Right, that part. But we don't do that because in a society which we are governed by social media, which we are governed by opinion, which we are not governed by our own research and education, that's what we have. So everybody's opinion is easily persuaded. Even if you believe something, you may voice it, you may not, or you might go with the popular opinion of persuasion. Again, I believe that we're intelligent human beings on the planet, and we can make choices based on our on information that we receive, what we know, for what we're experiencing with our own families. So we don't need anybody to tell us what to do. And I believe until the people understand the strength of their voice, the strength of their vote, the strength and the power that they have to create what they want, will this all change? But right now, everyone's just trying to survive. They're trying to figure out life. They're trying to figure out, well, nothing's normal. There's a new change. What do I do? People have had relatives die of COVID. I mean, there's a lot going on.
And that's the problem. There are two things, two governing documents, I would say, that Americans can abide by, can resort to, can look at. And without applying any interpretation, you just read it exactly the way it is laid out, we would avoid so many problems in life. The Bible and the Constitution. But
that's another.
But that's another conversation.
I understand what you're saying. However, we have a strong group of people who have moved away from that because it's dictating to them how to live their life, and it has caused problems not only in the church. I mean, and I get it because I've sat and had different conversations with people, and the whole point is to go to the Bible. And my thing is, as I work in the community and you have a young woman who is pregnant and she's not really understanding everything she needs to understand about the decision that she's getting ready to make, whether she keeps it or not, you're telling her to go to the Bible. She's not trying to hear about the Bible unless she's been raised that way. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
And I think a lot of people like to use the Bible as the go-to.
Tiffany, I'm cutting you off right there.
You can't. No, just kidding.
I'm cutting you off right there because guess what?
We're out of time.
Yes, we're out of time, and that is a topic that we're going to pick up on next time. We're going to talk about the governing documents of life, of an American life.
We are, and I agree with you. I agree with you on those.
Ladies and gentlemen, please tune in Tuesdays and Thursdays on TECN TV.com and catch Tiffany's show, Beyond the Lines. Beyond the Lines with Tiffani Jones on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 11 p.m. Eastern Time, 10 p.m. Central, 8 p.m. In California, NIA, that other country that's attached to us for some strange reason. But you can catch us there, and Tiffany, thank you so much. Thank you so much for
You're welcome.
being a part of my shenanigans today. Please, please, please. Please tell us where people can find you, connect with you, and all that good stuff.
BeyondTheLines.tv, you can find me there, where you can watch episodes and things of that nature. But as you said, I'm on TECN TV.com every Tuesday and Thursday. So, and my show's a little, light and bright. I'm not going to come down heavy with this is how it should be. No, I'm just kidding, Randy. You guys do a wonderful job, and I bring the balance, and it's more, it's lighter. We are going to have conversations with entertainers, politicians. We're just going to work with a lot of different people and have a lot of people on the show and just have fun. So join me, and I look forward to being on your show again, Randy, to talk about what we just left off.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much again. All right, folks, we're going to jump out of here. I am beyond time. I know David McQuill's going to probably call me and cuss me out for running into his time. But you can catch me on Twitter and all the Twitter, Getter, MeWe, Gab, Facebook, and all that good stuff at Randy Perm. You can support my campaign at rpermforus.com. You can also connect with me on the email at randyperm@gmail.com, rperm@gmail.com. And if you want to be a guest or a sponsor of the show. Take care. God bless you all. We will see you all on Monday. God willing, God bless. Be safe out there.
You are listening to the Exceptional Conservative Network. For more information, go to www.theexceptionalconservativeshow.com.
Because it helps us live life